For today's practice piece, we'll take the pretty mimosa flower and try painting it 2 different ways. Hello, my friends. Welcome back. My name is Shayda Campbell, and today we're going to paint mimosa 2 different ways. So I'll give you a quick supply rundown. I've got 2 little pieces of paper on my desk here. They're just nice handmade watercolor paper that I've taped to the desk with washi tape, keeps everything in place. And then I have this wonderful book, The Flower Color Guide, and it's a great reference material if you love painting flowers like I do. My mom got this for me, but you can purchase it on Amazon. I'm going to link it below. And this is mimosa with its long, thin leaves and its bright little bauble-like yellow blooms. Now, we're going to paint mimosa 2 ways today. So I have my watercolor paints and I also have gouache. I've got 2 glasses of clean water, a couple round paint brushes. And what we're going to do together today is create 2 paintings of the mimosa flower, one that uses just watercolor and one that uses watercolor in combination with gouache, because the 2 mediums work really beautifully together, and I want to show you that. Now, I am mixing up watercolors to start here. I mixed French gray with indigo and lots of water to give me this nice, cool, very light gray. And I am going to fill in a beautiful light gray backdrop, and so just going over the entirety of this paper on the left. And of course, because I've taped it down to the table, I also get a nice clean white border there when I take the tape off. This painting is going to be the one that incorporates watercolor and gouache. Gouache is highly opaque, so I'll be able to do a yellow flower on top of a darker background. So that's one of the nice things about gouache. And then while that gray backdrop is still ever so slightly wet, we're going to begin painting the mimosa, still working in watercolor, although we will add gouache to this one later. Now, because the backdrop is a little wet, we're going to get this wonderful sort of fuzzy effect. The stems and leaves that I'm painting, these long, thin stems that are very heavy and tilting with the weight of the blossom, they are just a little bit blurred because of the wet backdrop. You want it to be wet enough to get that effect, but not so wet that you just end up with a big green blob. Then we're going to leave that alone, and we'll add gouache to it later when it dries. Now on the right, we'll begin our second mimosa painting, but this one is going to be just watercolor. So in typical form, because I'm using watercolors here, I want to start with my lighter color, like yellow, because I really can't do dark green and then add light yellow on top. That's just not something that I'm going to be able to do with the watercolor medium. So with your round brush loaded full of a nice bright lemony yellow, you're going to get really free and just paint all these clusters of little dots and circles, and those make the mimosa blooms or blossoms. Then, while the yellow is a little bit wet, might be dry in some areas, but might be wet in others, you're going to come through with a warm green, that same warm green like olive brown that you used for the first one, and you're going to start dragging the brush through and placing little stems and branches. And it all kind of blends and blurs together in a really nice free way, and that's what I love about watercolor. You can get very loose with it, very perfectly imperfect, and just kind of don't sweat the small stuff. You can forget the little details and just have fun. Paint those long, thin leaves in a single brush stroke. If you get some blending and blurring of green and yellow, that's fine. I think that looks nice. And if you need to add more blossoms, more yellow blossoms, go for it. We're just kind of going back and forth here from green to yellow. And then eventually I also took sort of a darker green. To darken your green, you can mix brown in or just a bit of blue or like a deep phthalo green, a dark color like that. And we're just adding some more leaves. And in that way you get some light leaves and some darker ones. And the whole thing looks really lively and pretty. And that's almost the watercolor one almost done. It was so simple and fun to paint. Remember, this is just a little practice to show 2 ways to approach one plant, but it truly is just like a Saturday morning, half-hour practice piece. So with our watercolor practice done, let's head back to the left-hand painting and add some gouache. I'm going to mix up the gouache first. If you haven't used it before, this is what it looks like. Comes in little tubes, and you need to add a lot of water to this medium. It's not great to use it right out of the tube. So the colors I'm using, you want to have a bit of yellow, maybe some white if you need to lighten your yellow, and green. And I mixed, I think, Windsor green and sap green to kind of give me the green color that I wanted, but use any green, it doesn't matter. This is just practice. If your yellow is too golden, you could put just a hint of green in it to give you a little bit more of a citrusy yellow. And we are not going to work on the blossoms yet. We're actually going to take that nice dark rich green, and you saw how much water I added to that gouache. It should come out of the tube the consistency of that like toothpaste, and you should be using it the consistency of liquid. And we're going to add some nice dark leaves to the light fuzzy leaves that we painted in watercolor. So now we can add some more detail. Now we can be a little more precise and maybe add some little stems. And then also using the green gouache, I'm going to add these tiny little mimosa blossoms that haven't really fully blossomed yet, so they're green, not yellow. And then here's the wonderful thing about gouache. When that has dried, when all that green paint has dried, whether it was gouache or watercolor, we can take that wonderful light yellow on the end of our brush, and we can begin to add those mimosa blossoms. And it's really fun to add them at the end because they'll cover up all the green branches, so it'll look like they're really hanging off the branches. It's a really easy way to paint, to add the lighter colors later. I think that's one of the trickiest things about watercolor is you always have to be thinking light first. And we're just painting all these little mimosa baubles, lots of little dots. And that's it. Once that is complete, you like the look of your flower, we're going to take off all the tape. And of course, on the gouache and watercolor piece, you're going to have that beautiful border, clean white border. And you may just step back and be all done at this point. Or if you're like me, you want to add a little more white to that gouache and just add some highlights to the mimosa. And I had kind of a blob area on the watercolor. So even though this one's supposed to be just watercolor, it has a little bit of gouache on there as well, because you can always add gouache to your watercolors for beautiful effect. Thanks for watching today, guys. Please hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you soon.